A recent Manpower survey said that the McAllen metro area was tops in the nation as far as prospecting for jobs. More employers here as compared to any other metropolitan statistical area across the entire nation, more employers here said that they definitely would be hiring this coming quarter. That's pretty good news, right? Good news for us. You got more than a third of employers saying they're definitely going to be hiring. But last I checked, I don't think we have any major industry, manufacturer, and big employer in South Texas. It's an amalgamation of stuff. Joining us on 710 KURV to look at what this means for us and, by extension, the nation, Dr. Ray Perryman from the Perryman Group. He is our Texas economist. Dr. Ray, welcome back to the show. So what say you, Dr. Perryman? McAllen, number one, as far as job creation, is that good or bad for the nation?
Well, I think it's a good indicator. You have to realize this survey comes out every month, and what they do is they look at the percentage of the employers they survey that are hiring versus those that are not hiring or cutting back, take a difference. That's how they get the index. And what it says is basically McAllen does, as you said, doesn't have one huge employer, doesn't have one huge industry, but it's a diverse economy, it's a growing economy, and a lot of people there are looking at looking around and saying, hey, it makes sense to hire right now, and that's somewhat indicative of the trend we're seeing around the country. Obviously, McAllen's doing better than some other places right now. And again, I emphasize this is a 1 month survey. You don't get a whole lot into it.
Yes, sir.
But what it says is, on the whole, those places that have a lot of good, stable industries, a good, strong retail base, that sort of thing, are doing pretty well right now, and that's borne out by numbers in other places as well.
And again, this is a gauge of percentages. And in a small market like this, when the numbers change just a little bit, it tends to change the percentage quite a bit. And is it fair to place the McAllen MSA in the same league as everyone else? Huge metro areas like Houston and Dallas and Detroit. Say, okay, compared to everybody else, McAllen is way on top because, again, a small change in a stat, in the actual raw number, that will change the percentage in McAllen's favor.
Well, certainly it doesn't take as much to move the percentage in McAllen as it does other places. However, I would just add to that, this is a nationwide survey of all MSAs, and there are a lot of MSAs that are smaller than McAllen. So McAllen's somewhat in the middle of the pack.
Okay.
When you get to that point, it's not the smallest by any means. So it's certainly harder for Houston to move the dial, or Chicago or New York to move the dial than it is McAllen. On the other hand, it's a lot easier for San Angelo to move the dial than it is for McAllen.
1/3 service sector retail around here, 1/3 government jobs, and 1/3 light manufacturing and everything else. What do you think of the McAllen economy so far?
Well, the McAllen economy has a nice diversity to it. A little more government than most because of its location and some other factors. But the high percentage of service and retail is pretty common these days. Obviously, you have a big cross-border trade market, and that's what drives some of that. That's not at all uncommon. If you look around the country, almost every place you look now, the service sector is the dominant sector in terms of jobs, followed pretty closely by the retail trade sector. So that's really not all that uncommon to see that happen. The thing you don't have, as you pointed out, is you don't have a big major driving industry, and that can be good or bad, because those big driving industries tend to be very cyclical. And certainly some of your friends in the oil patch in Texas tell you that. When it's good, it's very good, and when it's bad, it's horrid.
Yes, sir. Now, we got big industry on the way. Joining us on 710 KURV, Dr. Ray Perryman from the Perryman Group.
Dr. Perryman, Tim Sullivan here. So where are the jobs for the most part in the McAllen MSA? What's driving this top ranking?
Ken, a lot of the jobs are in the service sectors, as was pointed out. I mean, you're seeing some nice expansion in retail as well, but it's health services, which is growing quite a bit. It's education services, which is growing quite a bit. It's some of the business services. Those are where most of the actual sheer number of jobs coming. A little bit in leisure and hospitality as well.
So does this survey take in just the McAllen MSA? Because just to the east of us in Brownsville, there's a whole lot going on. Rocket launches coming, LNG nodes coming, and the ramp up to that, there is going to be a lot of jobs and employment. Are these two separate MSAs? we're all hoping down here that eventually it's going to be one single MSA. But how does this survey compare the two?
Yeah.
I suspect eventually there will be one MSA that's driven by things like traffic counts and a lot of other things. And you're certainly in a situation there where you're approaching the point where you become a single MSA with the economy as large as it is. Brownsville has a very different economy, and obviously Cameron County includes Padre Island, which impacts tourism. It has, as you mentioned, a lot of new LNG investments, which are huge multi-billion-dollar investments. It has the rocket launchers, which are certainly getting a lot of attention. It's not as many dollars as some of the other things, but it certainly gets a lot of attention. It's a very different economy. But I think that what that points to is there will be months when in this survey Brownsville does better than McAllen. It'll be the months when those places are hiring and their suppliers are hiring and the people who are going to have stores close to them are hiring and that sort of thing. There'll be months like that. This is a single month's number, but it turns out right now you're just in a situation where some of the major industries in the country are lagging a little bit and not being as robust as they are. Certainly the oil industry being one, but there's some others as well. And your situation with just a nice diverse economy with a lot of different things in it just puts you at the top of the list this time. If you look at the cities on the list, most of them are kind of mid-sized cities. The top 5 or so, I think there's one in South Carolina, one in California, and 2 in Florida, but none of them were the big, huge metropolis type cities that made the list this time.
Texas economist Dr. Ray Perryman joining us on 710 KURV. And as you watch the evolution of the South Texas economy, are you watching with the same glee and excitement as we are with the potential for growth down here with, as you mentioned, the healthcare industry? And that in part is going to be fueled by the new medical school down here, the growing university.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and with the heavy manufacturing, there's also on the way, which we didn't even mention that for Brownsville. NAFTA trade with the Pacific Highway in Mexico and the LNG and everything else. This economy in about 10, 20 years is going to look very, very different.
It really is, and I'm very excited about it. I get the privilege of coming down there fairly often and obviously analyze and forecast it all the time. It's very exciting to see all these things happen. We've worked with some of the companies who are doing some of the big investments and worked with some of the people on some of the infrastructure and highway projects. And it's a real privilege to see all that coming together at once. And I think it does create a great deal of potential.
Dr. Perryman, we'll keep in touch. Dr. Ray Perryman from the Perryman Group joining us on 710 KURV.